Hi, everybody. Happy birthday. We are one. Welcome to our 1 year podcasting anniversary, Podiversity. We have been podcasting Energy Works for a year, a full year. This is our 52nd episode. We have been here every week, dropping a new episode every Monday. It has been an amazing journey, and we're so excited that you're still here with us. And so we thought we would take this opportunity to talk a little bit about this 1 year podcast journey and what it's been like and how and if and why we're going to keep going forward. So the reason we're even here at all is because Blaine had this amazing idea to start a podcast. So I'm going to kick it over to my podcast bestie here to talk about why we even got on air in the first place. Hi, Blaine.
Hi, Lauren. I like how you threw if in there. Maybe there's always a little undercurrent of if.
There's always an if.
Yeah. You never know what life's going to bring. So I really like this podcasting story because I think there's a life lesson in here. At least for me, it was a life lesson, but maybe for some of the listeners and viewers too. So this was before I was in partnership with Energy Medicine Yoga, where this story begins, when I still had my own company and was supporting Lauren and her company on the side. And I had decided that I wanted to start a podcast, and I wanted a podcast partner. And so, this was, I don't even know how many years ago now. It was a while back. And so I write my intentions down. I have my process in which I write down on the new moons and the quarters and the months and that sort of thing. I like to record what I want to draw into my life. And so then as I'm doing my more minute scheduling, I have to do my part. And so what can I do to draw in what I need? So I want a podcast partner. So I just write it down. I want a podcast partner. I didn't want to be a solo. I want a podcast partner. And I just kept at it, and I would go into different business groups and think maybe I'll meet my podcast partner here or join. It was just always on my mind because I kept writing it down. I just wouldn't let it go. And just one never came out. There was never anyone who I thought I had the chemistry with to do a weekly podcast, to do a weekly show. And I didn't let the dream go for a long time. And this is, however, in the meantime, I'm meeting with Lauren every week. Lauren and I talk all the time. And it's just the two things never connected for me. And so eventually I decided that it was time to let the dream go and that it wasn't happening. And maybe the universe did not have podcasting in mind for me. So I finally tell Lauren that I'd been searching for a podcast partner for a year or two and that I had decided that I couldn't do it. And Lauren just perked right up and said, "What? I want to be your podcast partner." And it's such a lesson in what's right in front of you. And you're looking here and there and here and there and searching and dreaming and manifesting, and your solution is right in front of your face. And I couldn't have been more surprised, which is just funny. I can really see the irony of this. I think that there's worthiness issues there. I think that I thought that I wasn't worthy of a podcast with Lauren Walker. And so it's just I have worthiness issues. I'm constantly trying to work on them and overcome them. And so I think my worthiness issues just created blinders around me that this makes all the sense in the world. And so then I started working with a podcasting consultant just on the technical side, because the technical side of podcasting I didn't know anything about. And then Lauren and I recorded the trailer and the first 7 episodes, and we released them 1 year ago.
I love that. I'm so glad that we did. And I love that story because, I wanted to do a podcast too, although I wasn't calling it that per se. In my mind, I thought, I want to figure out how to start a YouTube channel so that I can go on daily or weekly or whenever, and just talk directly to people, directly to my students, directly to my reading audience, directly just to the world, and just kind of share my thoughts and ideas and just kind of have it be free form. And you think, oh, it's really easy. Anyone can start a YouTube channel. And that is true. But it's actually to have it have any traction and to connect it to a business that already exists. It's not that easy. And I am not a technical person at all. And so I kept asking Blaine, like, could you help me figure out this YouTube channel thing? And she's like, okay. And we put it on the list, but it was so far down the list because we always had so much to work on. And she was still running her own company. So to run this tiny little sidebar piece of my company was it never just made it to the front burner. And so when she said, let's do a podcast, I was like, well, geez, that's exactly what I want to do. And so it was just it was like put your, peanut butter in my chocolate, and we've got a Reese's peanut butter cup or Justin's peanut butter cup, or I'm not sure if we're allowed to we just did some product placement. We're not even making any money on that. And that's actually a piece of the podcast because product placement. People make a lot of money. Let me just say, some people make a lot of money podcasting. And it helps if you're super famous. And I love that Blaine is so gracious to say that, I was too big of a fish to ask me to do this podcast with her. But those of you who know me and know us, like, I am a tiny little minnow in the big fish world. And so we are not, a famous podcasting duo. We're not like Tina Fey and Amy Poehler. We're not Julia Louis-Dreyfus. We're not getting, asked to promote products on our podcast. And it takes a lot to make a podcast go, way more than I thought it would. And we don't have a team. You're looking at the team. We have a couple of other people that help us do edits, but like this is the team. So when, for example, I do my spin-off Cool People, Big Ideas, nobody's bringing me these people and like vetting them and reading the books for me and like showing me the notes. Any person that comes on Cool People, Big Ideas, I'm reading one book or 20 books, and I'm writing all the notes and I'm doing all of that. And, so it's a big thing. And a lot of people have the idea, let's do it. And then they don't follow through on it. And that is because it ain't easy. And Blaine, you probably know a whole lot more of that than I do because you are lifting up way more than half of this podcast. Let's be honest.
Yeah, we do have a mini team on the back end. We have an editor of the podcast, and then we have some people who help us with the graphics. And so those, I'm highly involved in the podcast notes and the titling and that sort of thing. But when you see the pretty picture that goes with each episode, we have a team who help us with that. So we do have a little bit of a team, but the most of it is done by Lauren and I, at least all of the creative content sort of thing. And in the podcasting space, it's the new world, right? It's crowded for sure. And also podcast growth is projected. It's astronomical how much podcasts are expected to grow. And money to be made and opportunities and that sort of thing because of podcasting. But it's not like 12 years ago where the people who got in first definitely and have stayed. And that's the big thing if you're someone listening and thinking about starting your own podcast. And I know you're out there because sometimes I get questions from you about how to start a podcast. Is that the longevity is quite short. We get podcast metrics. We can see how many listeners we have. We can see the genders of the listeners. We can see what countries they are from. Sometimes we can see how they found us or other types of similar podcasts to ours that they listen to. And globally, our podcast ranks pretty high. But when you look episode by episode, our listener numbers are not that high. And the reason why we do rank pretty high is because we have not missed a week. We have put out an episode every single week for over 50 weeks now. And there's a term, pod fade. And what pod fade is people decide to start a podcast, and then after a few weeks they decide that it's more work than they want to keep doing. It's a long game for sure. And Lauren and I talked about this quite a bit before we went in, that you're for sure investing more than you are making, and then a lot of people going in and maybe purchasing your products or buying your courses or joining your memberships. In the case of what we sell, sometimes it's hard to directly tie it back to them coming from podcast listening. But it's a long game, and people do fade out. And so just by virtue of staying in the game, you actually kind of rise and rise and rise in the rankings, which means that in searches, your name shows up more. And I think I just saw people send me rankings all the time because they want me to hire them. Like, hey, let me promote your podcast. Here's your rankings. And we were number 11 in energy in that one.
Wow.
Yeah. So over time that should keep going up. And one other thought that I had, so I was listening to a podcast. This was Laura and I had just started. Like maybe we did our first 7 episodes in 1 week. We just did 7 to get them in the can and ready to go. So it was probably shortly after that. And this is a solo podcaster. And I know who she is from the business world, but she has a podcast. Her solo podcast is specifically on being like a working mom, kind of a mama CEO kind of podcast. And she had just done 50 episodes. And she was talking about how incredibly difficult it was. And she's like, I just can't believe I've done 50 episodes. Like, just looking back, it has been such a mountain of work. And holy cow, this is my 50th episode. And I'm listening like, 50? Is that hard? Is that really that big a deal? And then when we hit 50, same. I'm like, oh my God, it's just relentless.
I think that's a great word
So,
for
Lauren,
it.
that's
a great word for it, relentless. And, it's interesting. The reason that we have done this many episodes is 100% you, Blaine. Because when we started, I thought, let's do seasons. Let's do 13 episodes and drop them. And then next, whatever, when we decide to do it again, we'll do 13. And Blaine was like, no. We're doing 1 episode a week, and that's what we're doing. And for those of you that really listen to us all the time, she's metal, and that's very organized and structured, and that's a very structured response. I am a secondary water, and the water is like, let's do an episode now. Let's wait a little while. We'll do the next episode. And that is not how you build momentum. And so the reason that we have stayed in the long game is because of Blaine. And I think, it's just really interesting, this whole how we come up with ideas, creating content, all of that, and not to have it just be for the sake of dropping a podcast, right? We never want to just be like, we have time to fill, because we understand that you who are listening, your time is really valuable. And so we always want to do something of value. And so, sure, it would be easy for us to come on every week and just talk about whatever. And there's something to be said for that too. Sure, there's entertainment podcasts. I mean, you're listening to Tina Fey or Amy Poehler, right? And maybe your just takeaway is that you laughed for an hour. But you didn't have a takeaway that was maybe life-changing or transformational, which is kind of our sweet spot. Like, we are in the game of healing. Let me just say that. I think, because that's if we come up with one word for what energy medicine yoga is, which is our mother company, it's healing. And everything that else comes with that, manifestation, joy, passion, all of that is underneath that kind of rubric there, or that umbrella of healing. And so we really try to curate content that speaks to that is helpful for you, that helps you, do all of the things that you're trying to do in this life, which is full and rich, and there's a lot of stuff going on. And And I think it would be fun to talk a little bit about some of, I don't know, pitfall might not be the right word, but for lack of a better word, because we've had struggles. So maybe that's a better word. Let's talk a little bit about our struggles. And I'll start with just saying the first struggle I had was that continuity piece, that we are going to do a podcast every single week. And there have been times where I'm like, oh, I just can't. But we're not going to can't. We can. And we are going to, and we do, and we have. And so I don't know if that's has been a big of an issue for you, Blaine, as it has been for me. That kind of, I mean, did I use the word relentless or did you? Now I can't even remember. I think I did. But you started it. You did say relentless too. So what do you think? Is that an issue for you, or what other issues do you have that makes this so momentous? Because you said that you didn't think it would be, and now here it is, and it is momentous. Why is that for you?
Yeah, I mean, what makes it hard for me is the amount of real estate it takes in my mind. Because it's, there's the part where I interact with Lauren, where we're working with our individual schedules. We're trying to come up with topics. We have a running list. We have, we also run the rest of our business. And so we kind of have this massive to-do list that we share a file, and we're always putting things in and crossing it off and putting things in and crossing it off as we do them. And some things sit on that list a long time because they're not high priority, so they stay at the bottom. Some things are urgent. It's just this running to-do list that a business has. But we keep a list of podcast ideas on there. So sometimes when we're talking about anything and then maybe we get into a little dialogue, we're like, oh, that could be a future podcast, and we write it down. And then we see if the energy is still there. Sometimes it feels very energetic in the moment, like a good resonance. And then we look at it later and we're like, no, we can't do a podcast on that. For for any reasons, like it would be boring or it would be politically incorrect or something like that. We decide later to trash some ideas. But there's that side of the real estate in my brain. But I'm also managing the video editor, and we are not her. I mean, we're a small, little part of what she does. She has plenty of other clients besides us, and it's not like it's some kind of schedule where every Tuesday I send her fresh content, and she, because it's sometimes we have a whole bunch of content at once. Sometimes there's a little bit of a dry spell. Sometimes, Lauren works with guests, and those are longer, more complicated podcasts that, it's very, for her, on the receiving end of this, we are, I don't know a sporadic, I'm a sporadic client of hers. And so I have to kind of keep her on track. And if I haven't received something back in the amount of time that I thought I was going to receive it, I have to, check on her. And then when it comes back, then I'm the one I'm like the puppeteer, right? Now someone needs to go in. I'm not the one, because AI, if you watch on YouTube, you'll see the closed captions, the words at the bottom. So those are created by AI, as as in the video, the AI starts to type out the words. But there's issues there. I mean, there's always misspelled words, or we slurred or slang. And then once we get into energy words and yoga words and Sanskrit words, our vocabulary, the editors told us, we have the craziest vocabulary of all her clients. I mean, she doesn't even know what these words are. And so there ends up being a lot of things that need to be corrected. So then I send the video to someone on our team who just watches the whole thing, and then just types out, change this to this, change this to this, and then I'm the one who sends that back to the editor. And then, I'm making sure it comes back, and then I'm getting the show notes. And then we have our social media person who takes the video and makes reels out of them. And there's so it's just a lot of mental real estate that's constantly, it's this program that's constantly running in my mind to make sure that nothing gets dropped, and that there's something that goes out the door every Monday.
And that's something that goes out the door is fun and exciting and enriching, and not kind of stuck in the, the minutia of all of that stuff that you just said that you do. That I'm so grateful that you do that, because I don't have to do that stuff that I wouldn't even have the first clue how to do anyway. And so it's a lot. And like you said, this isn't an income generating part of our company at all. It's actually, if we just looked, at the spreadsheet straight up without looking at, future possibilities and all that, it's actually a drain. Like it takes a lot of resources and it brings in $0. And so we kind of balance that against the desire for us to have this sort of direct interface with our community, which is you, because we love to. And that's, let's flip to the other part of it, because we're like work, slog, slog. This doesn't sound fun at all. And don't start a podcast because it takes a lot and it brings you nothing. So the flip side of it is it's been really joyful to connect with so many people, to read people's comments and to get the feedback. Like, this was amazing. That helped me so much. That was great. And now I'm joining your community. I'm joining your membership. I'm joining your teacher trainings. And so, yes, that's a financial piece, but more that's a piece of we are growing our community of healing and joyful participants of EM yoga all over the world, and that piece is really exciting. And you know, we had a whole podcast on this, but here's another. I don't know. Downfall might not be the right word again. I'm just like, here we are on a podcast. I can't think of any words, but it's been very challenging as we grow for both of us to self-regulate to the fact that people are listening to us, which sounds kind of odd because we're doing a podcast. That is the whole goal, is to have people listen to us. And of course, back to the very beginning, talking about, you know, the peanut butter cup, if we ever want to have a sponsor, which we would love, anyone listening out there that feels like you're in alignment with EM Yoga, we would love to consider sponsorships. But no one's going to consider sponsorships until you have a certain number of listeners, right? And then we'll get to say, weed out and say, well, we don't think you're in alignment, or we do think you're in alignment. And like, AG1 Greens, if you're listening, we're in alignment with you. We'd love to have you sponsor our show. But that's not going to happen until we have a lot of listeners. And so as we're growing, both Blaine and I, in our own ways, so I'll just speak for myself first, but have been sort of digesting and assimilating the fact that people are listening to us. And so it's a good thing, but it's also a little nerve-wracking. And I really speak off the cuff most of the time. I mean, most of us do, right? You don't really, you know, kind of police your thoughts while you're having a conversation. But if you're having a conversation that's going to be going out to, let me just graciously say, 1 million people, hopefully 1 million people, then you want to say the right thing. You want to you know, represent yourself well, and your thoughts and your company and everything that you're doing. And so I've noticed that there's a bit of a different persona. And I don't really love that, because my goal all the time in every part of my life is to be authentic. And if you're watching this, you'll see, like, I don't wear any makeup. My hair is crazy. My clothes are just like whatever I have. Like, there's no wardrobe here. There's no, you know, the lighting is just whatever it kind of is. It works sort of. But I really want to be authentic. I never want to have this persona that is different from who I am in real life or who I am as a teacher. Now, obviously, there's little degrees of that. You're different in every circumstance that you're in. But the more authentic you can be in all of those, I feel like the more the attunement that you have with your own self, because you're not always, well, who am I here? And who am I here? And who am I here? So I try to be, and I think I am for the most part, authentic on these podcasts. And sometimes I feel like that might get me into trouble, or I feel like I say something stupid and then I want to like pull it back. And, you know, we did this whole podcast on this one horrible thing in my own mind still that I said at the beginning of this podcast that I did with the writer Sebastian Junger, that I just feel like I sound so just cringe. But there it is. That was my authentic me. I guess I'm cringy some of the time. So that's been a challenge for me to just like be who I am and be okay with that in all of these different permutations. So I don't know, Blaine, do you struggle with that still too?
I do. I think differently than you, or maybe not quite as much. There are like, to peel back the curtain a little bit, it is, I'll say, not uncommon that Lauren and I record a podcast and I zip it up, move on with my life, don't give it a second thought. And Lauren's like, I need to watch that. I need to hear that again. I need to make sure that. And so I think that, and this is all element, right? Like if you study with us and the 5 elements, Lauren's elements are different than mine. And it's quite in my element to like, check, move on to the next thing. Check, move on to the next thing. I'm not deep in the emotional pools as much. And I always feel like I don't have time for that so much. I have other things that I need to move on to. But when I do get that real nervous feeling is when I'm someplace that I didn't expect it. And someone says, oh, I heard on your podcast, blah, blah, or I loved your podcast when you said this. And I'm like, whoa, whoa, whoa. How do you even know about my podcast? And so that's when I'll start to get that like fluttery, like, oh my gosh, how many people who I don't even know are listening to this and forming opinions about me and maybe, and so that's when I get caught, I think, is when I have some unexpected interaction when someone mentions listening to me on the podcast. And then I'll start to be like, which one was it? And then there are times, I think I've told you this, Lauren, where someone will get a little bit deep on something I said, like it really moved me when you said this and this. And I'm kind of like, what episode was that? What was that recent? Was that, like, and are you sure that was me? I don't remember saying that at all. So I think that's what happens maybe when you just move on a little too fast. But and they're so heartfelt. I mean, it truly, whatever I said was very impactful. And I don't want to be like, what? And I don't want to say like, when did I say that? Like, I don't know, just somehow like, so I really just hold space and, thank them for the feedback. And I appreciate knowing that they were moved and, I guess fake it a little. I don't know if it's fake, but I mean, I really try to make it about them, even though my head is like, I said, what? When did I say that? Was that me? And then I go down that whole, wow, people really do listen to this. And one other thing that I've used as an example, so many of you listening know I run a business mentorship where we call it Conscious Business Builders Club, and it's people who are in the wellness business, entrepreneurs who are building their business. Most of them are solopreneurs, and I provide business mentorship. And, it's easy when people, and a lot of them are new to their business. They're just starting their business or they haven't had their business very long. And so they look at what I'm doing and it's kind of like, oh, well, it's so easy for you. Like you have this many people on your newsletter list and you have your and I'm always trying to make this point that like, but I started, like in the podcast is just such a great example of, hitting 50 episodes. And now more than 50, it's like there was an episode 1. And that, and one of the barriers to me even way years ago, to me even deciding to try to to write podcasts down on my little dream list was that I knew the first several episodes I would hate. I just knew it. It was like, Blaine, if you start, your first episodes are going to be terrible. You're going to be a rookie. You're not going to know what you're doing. But you have to go through that to get to, 50 episodes. And then, Lauren, I mean, maybe someday we do have a lot of sponsors. Maybe look, whatever happens. But none of it would have happened if I didn't start with episode 1. And, regardless of what you're doing in your life, like it's like starting with episode 1, knowing it's going to hurt. It's going to be terrible. You're not going to know what you're doing. It's going to cringe. You're going to want to never listen to it again because you can't handle it. But you have to do the episode 1 to get to episode 50. And so with my business mentorship, because this is, a newer project, I mean, it's been less than a year old. And until now, I've been sharing, if you don't start, then it goes nowhere.
Yeah. And it's really that Yoga Sutra that if you want to practice yoga, you do for a long time with total devotion, with no ceasing. right? And so that is what we've been doing. We've been actually practicing yoga with this podcast, which includes all of the things that happen when you're doing a traditional yoga practice. You think it's not working, you lose interest, you want to do something else, you're like, I don't think I like this anymore. And and then you keep going and you go through those moments. I mean, every podcast that we've done hasn't been like, that was amazing, at least for us, like from behind the scenes. We hope that you think they're all amazing. But there've been, I mean, like Blaine says, I'm the one that's always like, oh, I was horrible on that. We've got to refilm. And we actually haven't. We've never refilmed a podcast. And I don't think I've even required us to not release a podcast that I didn't like. We've really released everything that we've done, and it has been a learning curve, and it does get easier, and it gets more joyful, and it gets more interesting for us, especially as we grow, because we're getting the feedback. Like, we hear from you, and I'm gonna ask again. If you, I mean, obviously the same, right? If you like this podcast, drop a like, right? Drop a note in the link. But really, more than that, if there's something that you really want to know about, drop that in, because we are open, because we are going to do a podcast every Monday. It seems like from now into, like, we don't have an end zone, right? An end date here. So we're going to keep going. And so what is it that you want to hear about? What are you curious about? What do you want, what are you interested in? We just had a conversation with one of Donna Eden's senior teachers, who teaches for us as well, about a program that she's going to be teaching. And I thought, okay, I want to have her on the podcast, or I want to have her write for us. And what is it that she could do? And I mean, her knowledge sphere is just enormous. But we started to think about, for people that aren't in that pocket, what problem do people have that energy could be the solution to? Now, of course, I think anything, because energy is all there is, right? That's the substrate from which everything arises. So any issue that you're having, be it mental, physical, emotional, spiritual, it is a business, like anything. Your car, anything, it's all energy. But how does that translate for you? And we had the idea of grounding as something that maybe the layperson understands, because a lot of time we say, oh, I feel so ungrounded. And yet you might not actually know what that means in energetic terms. What does that mean to not be grounded? How does that affect your life, your day to day? Maybe you're curious about that. If you are, drop us a note. Or if there's something else that you're like, I really wish I knew the energetic solution to, literally fill in the blank and put that blank in the note, and we will circle back, and we want to give you what you want to hear. This isn't a vanity project. If it was a vanity project, we would wear makeup, we would have wardrobe, and we would just be talking about things that made us feel good. This is not a vanity project. This is our, can we go so like huge as to say, like, this is our offering to the world to help make the world a better place? Does that seem too grandiose? I don't know.
I don't think so. I mean, I think that is why we do it.
Yeah, that's why we do it. Any thoughts, Blaine, about this into the future, the unending future?
No, I think I can like hold up fake champagne glass and clink it to you through the ether. Here's to the next 50.
Here's to the next 50. I love it. Maybe we'll come back every July 1st was our very first podcast, July 1st. And I think this year that the 52nd drop will be on June 30th, which is that'll be the Monday before the 1st of July. And so maybe every July 1st we will circle back and celebrate another year. We'll grow, we'll grow, we'll grow. At some point, we'll have amazing sponsors that are in total energetic alignment with the work that we do, which is about making the world a better place, B Corps, 1% for the planet, those kind of companies that are doing good things, that are trying to regenerate and reclaim and make this world the heaven on earth that it has the possibility to be. And so We want to be that kind of company. I feel like we are that kind of company, and you, our listeners, are those kind of people. And so we grow, we grow, we grow. And I don't know, I'm going to date myself, but there was a commercial when I was a kid for this shampoo and conditioner that I probably wouldn't even touch right now because it's probably full of phthalates and all those horrible things. But the ad was, you tell two friends, and they tell two friends, and so on, and so on, and so on. And the screen would duplicate. First there were two, then there were four, then there were eight, then there were 16. That's how we grow. And so really what we want to say, a happy birthday to Energy Works, and thank you to all of you out there listening, supporting, cheering us on, and making the world a better place with your resonance as well. So thanks so much for listening. Thanks for celebrating with us. And we can't wait to see you and hear you on the next episode of Energy Works.